This is a test of the emergency broadcast system.
5. Check for sound. 4.
It's showtime.
3.
Let's
2.
go.
1.
Thanks to Rode Microphones and Harlan Hogan's VoiceOverEssentials.com, the home of the Portabooth Pro. This is the Pro Audio Suite podcast with Robert Marshall from Source Elements and Someone Audio Post, Chicago. Darren Robbo Robertson from Voodoo Radio Imaging, Sydney. From LA, George the Tech Whittam, the tech to the VO stars. And me, Andrew Peters, voiceover talent and home studio guy. This week on the show, we have a special guest, known in Australia as Gomez, in America, MPA. It's Michael Pearson-Adams from WAVES. How are you going?
G'day, mate. How are you?
Good. Now, I do understand you were saying just before we started recording that Andrew Sheps now refers to you as Gomez after you did a live webinar to Australia.
It's like one of the things that I started doing as part of my gig at WAVES when the pandemic hit was we pulled all of the in-person masterclasses I do around the world. Those obviously stopped. So I started doing these weekly online masterclasses with some of my friends like Andrew Sheps, Tony Maserati, etc. And we do them online, but they were always at like 6 o'clock in the morning for you guys. So we did the Southern Hemisphere edition of the WAVES Open Sessions, which was 5 o'clock was 6 o'clock in the morning for me. Andrew Sheps is in the UK, so it was about 11 o'clock in the morning for him. But one of the first things that happens is somebody comes on the chat and goes, "Isn't that Gomez?" And at that point, it was off. So now I find myself explaining to half of America who have never heard the term Gomez before in relation to me what the hell all that's about.
Yeah. And of course, when you're presenting to a room of newbies who have no understanding of any of that and they go, and now here to tell us all about WAVES, here's Gomez, it gives you a lot of credibility.
Right? Yeah. But the problem is, I mean, this is one of the things, and I get this because every time I come home, the first thing that happens is, one of my mates in Brizzy will say, "Gomez, Goey." And Gomez was my nickname for so long that it actually gained nicknames. So Gomez turned into Go-Go, turned into Goey, turned into, one guy at Southern Cross once called me Gizmo in a press release. I had somebody at CFM once put me down as the new director of production for the network, and his name is Gonzo. I mean, it's like it just took on a life of its own.
Yeah, it's funny. You're an Aussie when you abbreviate a nickname.
Yeah, right? We can actually do half a syllable nickname.
Absolutely. So to get to the nuts and bolts of it, though, we got you on here to tell us all about the new version of WAVES, WAVES 12. One of the things I see you guys spruiking is being the ability to resize the plugin on the screen.
In V12 now, every single plugin has a little twiggy kind of like thing that you click at the top that you can go 75%, 100%, all the way up to 200%. So if you're using a couple of different screens or multiple screens, or even if you're just like me and blind, it does really help, especially when you're doing things like, tuning vocals or tweaking a 10-band EQ. You want it bigger, or if you want to cram them all in, you can make them smaller. The thing is, though, once you actually make
the Avid, like how there's like a certain amount of space allocated by the top of the plugin by Avid, like that's the limit of how small it gets in Pro Tools, at least.
The good thing, the only thing I can tell you on that one is if you change the plugin size, so for example, if you're working in multiple DAWs, so for example, you start in Ableton and then you're finishing in Pro Tools. If you stick, for example, a Q10 and you stick it on 125% in one of them, it'll open on 125% in the next one as well.
Okay.
But if you go 75%, again, it'll open in 75%. So it kind of it's like a smell. It follows you around in good ways.
Because I love the Doro meters, and I know I'm not pronouncing it right. That's just the way I say it. Maybe I'm a dumb Aussie. Doro meters. Thank you. I've always wondered how you really pronounced it. I love them, and I use them in just about every session. They've always had the ability to resize, though. There's always been a small, a medium, and a large. So
yeah, there has always. I mean, that was. I guess one of the things with the Doro meters was it was a special lucky piece of code tweaking there. But it was specifically with very, very specific GUIs. So it wasn't something that could go on the fly. It was like, okay, so in this one, you can make this one bigger vertically or bigger wider or really big. But there wasn't something where you could go as extreme as this, as like small, really small, medium, big, really ridiculously large. And the other beautiful thing is you can make this default on every single plugin as well. So if you're totally blind, just make them all 200% and apply them as default, and it'll remember it.
That'll do me.
So I mean, the whole thing with V12 or any Waves version is we try and make sure that we are forward compatible with what's going on in the world, whether it comes to Windows 10 or Apple. Some people go, oh my God, we're never going to catch up. But whereas what we're really trying to do is make sure that we're flexible enough to keep, for the people who have got computers who are 2 or 3 years old to the ones who are just trying to live on the cutting edge. So V12 is going to be something that's going to be around for a while. I mean, if you take into account that V9 was around for a good few years in one version or another, you'll see it's like these version updates, when we go dramatically like V11 to V12, there's a reason. Like this is resizing, preset browsing is a really big one. A lot of these graphics are retina ready, and the future proofing for compatibility for a lot of these new DAWs and the new DAW updates that are coming up. That also helps as well. And then on top of that, we also, with one of these, this gets us the ability to do things like add plugins that have been around for a while into new bundles. Like Platinum, for example, now has Smack Attack, which is probably one of my favorite drum compressor plugins. And it has Submarine as well, which is just a brilliant... It's kind of like the new Millennium edition of MaxBass on steroids. It's brilliant. So yeah, it's good stuff.
What is interesting is that, and I don't know how much effort you put into this, I assume a lot, but I had an issue with Isotope making Steinberg Wavelab crash. It wasn't consistent, it was intermittent, but it would crash my DAW. So
we have a ton of people working a ton of hours to try and make sure that compatibility is as high as it possibly can be. Now, it doesn't mean that we capture absolutely everything as it comes out, but 99.9% of the time we're on it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm staring at a computer right now, and I'm in front of a camera and have lights right now, but you guys are doing this old-fashioned audio thing, so you can't see. But I have every DAW known to man on this computer because my title is Director of Training and Development. So it's my job to make sure that we train on all of the DAWs and different live platforms as well. And things, it's like I try and make sure if I don't see something working that I give the product team a heads up.
Even Audacity?
Even even Adobe Audition.
Wow. Yeah. I saw a trainer video on YouTube the other night. I was just Googling around, and it was someone doing a demonstration on how to create radio imaging on Audacity.
Wow! Somebody mentioned the words "cool" and "edit" in the same sentence to me last week, and it was like, "Oh my god!"
Nasty memories.
But to give you an example of some of the random things, like I just spent the afternoon editing a webinar that we're putting out as a video, and I did the whole thing in Sony Vegas. So, it's not Sony Vegas anymore, is it? It's Magix Vegas or something like that. But I'm running multiple video channels and 5 different audio channels and a ton of plugins and a master fader, and it's all working fine and dandy.
Let me ask you this before I get off my controversial horse, which is generally more of a pain in the butt to deal with as an OS for developers, Apple or Windows?
It really depends, not so much on the operating system anymore. It depends on the application, because when it comes to operating systems, if you look behind the curtains of them, there's so many similarities now between what happens and the way Windows 10 is glued together to the way an Apple OS or a Linux OS even is glued together. But when it comes down to things like, Pro Tools to Cubase to Ableton, etc., even the audio routing and patching behind the scenes changes. Like, for example, Pro Tools is a perfect example. It's like if you put a plugin on the master fader of Pro Tools and you move the fader up and down, your signal through that plugin is going to change, but that's not the same way that all DAWs work. So we have more time that we need to spend on compatibility with how the different workstations work to operating systems at the end of the day.
So the updates that they push on Patch Tuesdays on the Windows side, are they less of a crapshoot than what comes from Apple, or is it really they both throw you off kilter from time to time?
They both throw us off kilter. I mean, one of the things that we don't get a lot of in the product development world when it comes to especially things like software is we don't get a heads up like months ahead of time from Apple or Windows on, hey, heads up, we're releasing this and it might affect your software.
Right.
When you guys get that email, we get that email. So
right.
When I am an early adopter of technology, but at the same point in time, early adopters of technology when it comes to the audio world sometimes should probably, if I want to be a politician here, pull back and just go, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't update that software until I finish this recording session.
Yes. Yeah, imagine that.
Just in case something doesn't work properly. Yeah. So it happens a lot. It happens in live and studio side of things. So I spend a lot of time telling people, hey, listen, it looks new, it looks shiny. If you're in the middle of a project, hold off until you're done.
That would be a very, very gentle warning. I'm far more fatalistic about it. But.
Well, I mean, I still get text messages from people who, it's like, I'm not going to mention any names, but there's a guy who's got at least 20 Grammys who texted me 2:00 this morning going, I just updated to V12 and now my DAW won't open and I can't see my plugins. And I'm like, why would you do that in the middle of a session?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it happens at both ends of the spectrum. It's just sometimes we just get excited. And there are a lot of things in V12 that people are excited about. So, yeah, it's all good.
One of those, which moves us on nicely, one of those would be the presets stuff you mentioned.
The preset browser.
Yeah. Talk to me, because I find that reasonably quick anyway. How has that got better?
Well, there's a couple of different sides to this. One of the things that we did was we added in what we're calling the preset browser, which means that rather than actually going through and selecting a preset and then it, you click the preset and then the drop down disappears and it goes back to the plugin. Rather than doing that, now you can flick between the presets and the preset list will stay up, so you can literally flip between and really do a proper job of A-ing and B-ing between different presets and different tweaks. Now, when this comes in really handy, especially in radio and post-production, is when you've got a voiceover, for example, in the booth, and you've got 2 or 3 presets that you may have used for that specific talent before on different projects, and you tweak. So, like, say, for example, when I work with a voiceover from Microsoft, this one guy I work with a lot, it's like I've got like 5 different presets for him, depending on what kind of dialogue he's working on me with. And I can literally just kind of like arrow between them without actually leaving that list. And it makes things a lot easier. Also, no dropouts either, which makes things nice.
So it sort of gives you a preview? Is that what you're saying? So
exactly.
Cool.
And then, once you're done with that, then you can click out of the list and you're back to the plugin. Now, one of the things that makes this really nice is it just keeps your creative flow flowing.
Yeah, totally.
This is also another reason why I love Studio Rack, because with Studio Rack, you can do that. Plus, you can drag and drop the order of the plugins in your chain without any dropouts as well. So all these things are designed to try and stop people thinking about the technology and think more about creativity and just what they're doing in the audio world, basically.
Can you automate the plugin, the presets?
You can automate everything.
Like what I mean is this: say you put Pro Tools in Write, and you're listening, and you're like, all right, and here change preset, and boom, it changes every parameter in the whole plugin. Does all that get written to the automation of Pro Tools?
Anything that is available in the automation window of any Waves plugin gets written in, yes.
Right.
Now,
so when you switch presets, it changes all the parameters and writes a pile of automation into the Pro Tools window. So you can kind of perform that preset change. And because the presets happen smoothly, I guess my last question is, if you're in a reverb plugin and you flip the reverb, does it cut the tail of the reverb when you change the preset? Or does it, because some synths used to have a parameter or a feature where you could be playing piano and hit your last chord, switch to organ, your piano is still rolling or ringing out, and now you start playing organ.
That would be cool.
Yeah, it would, and I'm not going to lie, I haven't tried it yet. So
come on, Gomez, what kind of coach are you?
I'm a shit one. One of the things I will say is that this is one of the things that Studio Rack does really, really well. And for those of you who are out there who aren't aware, if you own any Waves plugins, Studio Rack is a plugin that you can download and install for free and authorize through your Waves Central account. And gives you the ability to save a chain of up to 8 plugins in a row and save it as a single preset. So in the radio world especially, that becomes in super handy when you've got voiceovers or you've got master bus effects on promos or commercials, and it's got an EQ and a compressor and a limiter and this and that and a delay or a doubler if it's someone like, our friend on here with the deep voice and 3 testicles going now. But one of the things that happens is when you open up the automation lane of that, it's like what you'll see is a huge list of numbers, because every single plugin we have, every single part of that plugin is automatable. So in Studio Rack, if you right click on any part of any Waves plugin, it will give you a number like P326. So now what you can do is you can make that part of a matrix where you can, say, for example, have the threshold of a C6 compressor raising at the same time as the input of an MB2.
You can tie parameters together.
Absolutely.
Wow, cool.
Yeah. So
and you can do it with a difference or something like that. Like
you can reverse them if you want to. So as one goes up, another one goes down. You can also control the range. So you could say, for example, okay, as I move this matrix knob up and down, I don't want it to make any difference to the subharmonics unless I get to this hertz, and then right. So you can create plugins that literally do the whole thing for you, and that's part of why we needed to go to V12. So all of this was a lot easier to do in things like Studio Rack.
So something I do for my clients is I make custom effects chains for their voiceovers, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, I do it on every platform. I try. It's not easy on all of them, but I try. So what I could do is make one of these and just say, okay, just install this plugin, and then here's your preset file I've written for you. You have to have the following plugins.
It's only Waves plugins in Waves Rack. It's only am I right?
Yeah, Studio Rack only works with SoundGrid compatible plugins. So now at this point in time, obviously the only company that's making V12 SoundGrid compatible plugins is Waves. However, Plugin Alliance has SoundGrid plugins, Softube has them, and another couple of companies have them. So it's a public API. So this is not something that's going to go away. It's something that's been around for a long time, and it's going to keep on growing.
If I could bundle like plug-in preset packs that are programmed by George the Tech that are like presets that people could buy that would get them 99% of the way there. And I would just dial in their EQ for them or something. That'd be pretty sick.
I mean, this is one of the things that a lot of people are doing already with things like the Gold Bundle. I mean, when I first bought the Gold Bundle, when I started using it at MCM, or Stereo MCM in 1995, I think, it was $2,000. The Gold Bundle now is over 35 plugins, and it's like $9 a month. And what a lot of talent are using it for over here is they're literally making it part of a subscription and saying, okay, so as part of my service to you and for you to make sure that me to help you make you sound good, I'm going to pay for this subscription for you, which gives you these amount of plugins plus Studio Rack plus these presets. And it means that they're sounding better. You get a better sound from them. Everybody's happy, and nobody's really paying a lot of money for it. So
we might need to talk.
Great pitch,
absolutely.
Gomez. Well done.
Yeah.
No, the whole concept of this is, I mean, we're the company who basically stopped charging through the roof for plugins. There was a point about 4 years ago where plugins dramatically went down in cost. And the reason was simple. It's like we got to a point in the world where industry budgets went down. iTunes came along. People weren't paying thousands for albums anymore. Budgets for post-production, radio production, and everything else went down through the floor. Nobody had those budgets anymore, and we needed to make sure that creativity kept on going. And one of the ways we could do that is to make sure everything was more affordable. Now, one of the things that Adobe came along and did was, with things like Photoshop and Lightroom and stuff like that, was create these subscription models. That was a really good model. So it's one of the things that we've done as well with Silver Bundle, Gold Bundle, Platinum Bundle, Mercury Bundle. So even if you're a small post-production guy or a voiceover, you do have the money to be able to have enough plugins to, make a difference and make a powerful difference in how you sound without breaking the bank.
I see Slate Digital have just done subscription too, $10 a month for like $5,000 worth of plugins or something.
Well, Slate was always subscription.
Oh, were they?
But Waves still
Slate's been doing that for a while as well.
Right.
So
like Slate was amongst the ones that sort of broke the plugin barrier in terms of, it's like I bought Gold Bundle when it was like $1,500 and upgraded up to. But I've been, using it since like I had a Nubus Pro Tools system.
Exactly. It was like same here.
And I can also say like, certain plugins like the, back in the day it was like the L1, like based a whole business off of that plugin probably for years.
I mean, this is also really one of the reasons why people go, oh my God, I wish I had the Mercury Bundle. And I go, but do you really need it? Because I can pretty much put money on the fact that if you have even a Gold Bundle, which isn't seen as like the, a really large bundle anymore, I can guarantee I put money on it. Most people aren't using all of the plugins that they already own. It's like one of the things which I do a lot of is I do a ton of online masterclasses and a ton of streaming videos on literally let's think outside the box. And I'm doing one next week on let's mix a record from start to finish with 3 plugins. And people are curious about it. So I think we've got about 2,500 signups so far because people are like, oh my God, you can't do that.
I'm going to cross this over to my own personal life. I do a mountain bike racing series called the Coaster Brake Challenge. We ride trails that most people learn to ride on mountain bikes on a coaster brake, a bike made to ride on the beach. And we're insane and it's dangerous. But the point is that if you have the skill and the ear and the whatever it is, whatever the sport is, you show up with any piece of equipment and you're going to outdo the guy that has the $10,000 carbon fiber full suspension, blah, blah, blah machine who can't ride the damn thing.
Absolutely.
And there's like a point of pride. There's like also people that ride fixie bikes in the city. Why the hell would you ever ride one of those things? Well, it's a thing. It's just a style. And because you can. And it's like in the world of audio production, having every tool in this toolbox can be completely crippling.
I think a lot of the time, especially when it comes to the plugin world now, the first console I was mixing on at 4BK, 6 of the channels worked. One of them had a Chinograph pencil circle next to it, and there was a rubber hammer so that when it dropped out, we hit that spot. We had speakers that were sitting on top of bread crates, and the room sounded like shit. Yet I still mixed a record in there that won 3 arias. So, it's totally possible. And the more tools you have, sometimes you're absolutely right. The more tools you have, it's a bit like the old analogy, when you only had one CD to listen to, it was easy to decide what you were going to listen to. But when you had a wall of them, you spent more time trying to decide what to listen to than listening.
Totally.
Yep. As long as it's not the analogy when all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail.
I'll be honest, like I still run my Pro Tools 9 system with, I'm not sure like what version of Waves I'm still running, but it's like, Waves.
I can tell you actually, because I'm staring at a computer on my right hand side that's running OS 9.2.
Yeah.
I'm running Pro Tools 4.5 on it. Yeah, OS 9.2, running Pro Tools 4.5, and I'm running Waves version 5 on that. And the reason that's there is because I mixed a record for Guy Sebastian about 15 years ago, and I had to pull it off.
It's in there.
And it was in there. It's like, so I had to pull up this. And when I started this machine, it was like the old fashioned boom. Boom.
I got the startup sound.
Love it. Love it.
I loved OS 9 and all those early
Me too.
OSs.
It was fast as hell.
Yeah.
And you could do whatever you wanted to. You could take the system folder and put it in the trash and it would just boot up. Mm-hmm. And
no, it was.
And
I mean,
like
it's
the god of your own computer.
This computer also has eMagic Logic Platinum on it, and it has opcode OMS Studio for the MIDI. It was like, oh my god,
time capsule machine.
So I have a time capsule for you. I still run a Mac 7100 with Nuverb cards from Lexicon in it.
Wasn't that the computer that had like 8 card slots in the back of it?
No, that was the Mac 2FX, which I did have one of those too. That was the NuBus one. And the 7100 is also NuBus. It's power. It was like the last NuBus.
I don't feel so old anymore.
7100, yeah. But that's like OS 7 for Mac.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, OS 9.2 is the only one I can remember. But it's like on the plugin thing, before we go on, I do want to mention one thing. For anybody out there who even has a small amount of plugins, my main advice is always find one compressor and one EQ that you're really good at and that you understand what they do, and you can recreate the world with those things. Mm-hmm. My favorite compressor has 3 faders, MV2. It's a low-level, high-level dynamic compressor. It has low-level gain, high-level, and then it has an output. That's it. It's my favorite compressor.
I'm with you. I love it. Use it all the time. That and I'll be honest, if I'm in a rush, I'll always grab the Renaissance stuff, the compressor and the EQ especially.
I like the C4. That's the one I use. I use the C4 a lot.
Yeah, the C4 is good.
EQ and a compressor. It's like a de-esser. It's whatever you want it to be. You can even remove noise with it. You can start expanding.
Right. Yeah,
that's a Desert Island plugin. Didn't we talk? Didn't we have a show about Desert Island?
I love that thing. I mean, honestly, like that is half the reason why I never bought an HDX system, because Waves didn't do DSP.
Not really. Well, I mean, and there's a reason for that. I mean, we can go into that if anybody's.
I know that. Yeah.
Isn't it amazing though? People still talk about, why didn't Waves do HDX? That's nearly 10 years ago. And the simple reason we didn't go HDX is because it was too hard. It's like it would have put us out of business. It would have taken us that long that it would have put us out of business. It just wasn't
going all the way back to the audio media card. Avid was working.
I still have one of those in the Mac I'm staring at with OS 9.2. I have an Audio Media 3 card.
And all the way back to that time, it was all my Motorola chips. Right?
Yeah. I mean, and when I was actually at Avid, the year that Avid, I was one of the senior product specialists on the HD side when Avid went from Pro Tools 10 TDM to HDX. It was the one year I left Waves and went to the dark side. And everybody was like, why aren't my plugins working anymore? It's simple. It's like Artaz plugins and TDM plugins were both connected to the Motorola chips, whereas the new computers, which couldn't use Motorola chips, were using FPGA chips, which is why there was a new plugin format, AAX, and Audio Suite was still there, but there was no RTAS anymore because they were all connected to the old chips. So yeah,
But it's funny. It's like that move in a way, kind of like that, and some other stuff opened the door for like UA to really kind of get in Avid's territory. It's like no one else had you guys came out with the DigiGrid, and that was like, hardware assisted plugins, and then UA's got their hardware assisted plugins, and Avid, in doing that and changing everything so radically, kind of, I think, let water into the breach that they had. I think
but credit where credit's due. One of the things that DigiDesign-Avid did was they created the first ever console that really used plugins and opened the plugin world up for the live and broadcast side. That changed the world on the live side. You mentioned DigiGrid. The format is actually called SoundGrid.
SoundGrid, I'm sorry, I apologize. Yeah.
No, you're fine. DigiGrid is a name of a company that makes SoundGrid audio interfaces, which was launched by WAVES and Digico. But SoundGrid is actually now an industry standard for live sound and broadcast when it comes to audio over Ethernet and DSP. But yeah, it's like UA did get a big hand in when the TDM cards went away. Absolutely.
They did, yeah. And then you were earlier talking about like matching things with plugins. This is actually a funny story because I have refused to bite into the UA thing, and everyone's like, "Oh, they sound so amazing," and da da da. And I've just always mixed everything I do with Waves. And one day my drive crashed. I had to use a UA system that was in the studio, and I'd do a session. And I kind of thought, like, when I was doing it, I was like, all right, I'm going to use all the same plugins. And then I screenshotted some things, and I brought
But they
it
don't
over.
sound the same.
They don't sound the same at all. And, it takes time to chase a mix. And I did get it finally with the Waves plugins. It took me, anytime you're chasing a mix, it takes longer. But I finally got it where I could just A/B between the mix I got the other day in the UA stuff and then the new mix I had with the Waves plugins, and got it transparent. But it was chasing it. And it was not even close to the same settings in the, like,
I think,
1176p.
Yeah, and there's a couple of different reasons. I mean, one of the things that's the downside of the UA stuff is the fact that there are no native versions. So if you leave the hardware, that's it, you're on your own.
Totally.
But the other thing is, which is, it's actually a simpler explanation than a lot of people expect, is, one Pultec doesn't sound the same as every other Pultec. I mean, JJP, Jack Joseph Puig's Pultec and Fairchild, which we actually took out of his studio and took to Israel and modeled and coded, they sound totally different to a Fairchild that UA might have used, or Slate might have used, or Softtube might have used. It's like the concept is the same. The knobs all have the same names on them, but the character of all those different pieces of vintage gear is vastly different. Like, with the CLA 2A and the CLA 3A, those were pieces of gear that Chris bought from a dealer over here, Vintage King, and they had restored them perfectly. So they sound completely different to a lot of people. I mean, there are a lot of people saying, I have a 2A compressor and it doesn't sound anything like the plugin. It's like, yeah, but the concept is the same. But not all of those hardware pieces sounded the same. They just don't.
Yeah. And I think when you go through a mix with a lot of like, because they should be in the same area, you should roughly get a similar amount of compression with a similar setting, but the cascading effect of all that on a whole mix, and you'd be surprised how different things sound in the whole thing,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like, I remember I did a masterclass once. It's literally like 12 years ago now. We did a whole masterclass. It's probably still somewhere on the website, where we compared a mix done on an SSL 4000 of a U2 song, and then we challenged somebody to do exactly the same mix with the plugins, and they were like, oh, it'll be exactly the same settings. And we were like, no, it won't. It's an interesting comparison because, even when, the SSL collection is based on the SSL 4000 G&E series consoles, and we modeled one of the original two of those consoles in the UK. And we had to go back and prove it once, because when Peter Gabriel bought the company, he was like, why do these guys have this modeling? So we had to go back and prove how close we were. But somebody else who owns a 4000G or a 4000E, apart from the fact that they have a huge electricity bill, depending on the history of the console and how well it's been serviced and how often the channel strips are being pulled out and cleaned and et cetera, the character of the SSL will be there, but the sound could be completely different.
Well, that's the same story with the guys in Austrian Audio when they were modelling the C12 for their new microphone. And they got microphones shipped in from everywhere, from big name Stevie Wonder's microphone C12, Quincy Jones C12 turned up. And the interesting thing was, as the guys from Austrian were telling us, is that Quincy Jones C12 was actually broken.
Yes.
And he didn't realise he'd just been using it. And but it was literally broken.
Wow. Yeah, it's sometimes broken is a good thing. It's sometimes broken gives you exactly what you need.
Yeah.
Look at me.
That's right. Look at all of us. Hey, I'm going to take you back on the subscription thing for a second and tell me if you can't answer this, because I'm sure sales isn't your bag. A couple of years ago, you guys ran a rent-to-own deal where you could pick 10 plugins and I think you got 2 free ones, and then you rented for 2 years and you owned them. I know you still run a rent-to-own deal, but when I was looking at it the other day, you've got to have one of the bundles and then you get to pick a couple of extras. The reason I'm asking is because I've started out the same as you guys with a gold bundle, but I've never upgraded to another bundle, but I've added plugins over the years. So I look at, say, a platinum bundle and go, hey, but I really want to rent to own something else. You know what I mean? Like upgrading to platinum is counterintuitive because I already own half the plugins that are on there.
But when I upgraded, like they gave me a special price on upgrading because I had the same thing. I had bought like a few plugins separately, and so they're like, well, here's the price for you to upgrade to Mercury because you've got gold and you've got, I forget what else I had. I had like SSL maybe.
Yeah, see, I got a shitload of other ones I've bought separately. That's right.
Yeah.
So there's actually two different answers to that question. On that, let's first deal with the WAVES Flex thing. We did discontinue Flex.
Is that what I'm talking about?
No, that's what I'm talking about.
You're talking, yeah, it's what Robbo's talking about. WAVES Flex, we did discontinue that because it really wasn't as popular as you might have thought it was.
Wow.
However, if you do still have a WAVES Flex plan, your plan will continue until you own the plugins at the end of the 24 months. Now, as far as the other things, yes, we do have. I mean, we're WAVES. We always have specials. And coming up to
you do,
yeah, I know.
Tell me, it's like, please.
It's crazy, I know. But now, what you were also talking about was upgrades. So one of the things, Robbo, that we do is when we look in your WAVES account, we take into account every single plugin. And we will say, okay, right, so you might have the gold bundle, but you've also bought this, and this. So if you want to go to this bundle, these are the plugins that you own that we can take into account that go towards that so that you don't have to pay for it again.
There you go.
The other thing is the WAVES update plan just went down in price again. And, you know, there's still a lot of... Right. Well, I mean, the thing about the WAVES update plan is, you know, people still come to me, you know, after 15 years here, people still come to me and say, you know, I don't want to pay for the WAVES update plan. And I go, well, if your plugins are still working and everything's fine, yeah, it is. Well, then fine, don't pay for it until you need it. Or if there's something in it that you want. If everything is not broken, if everything's working, then, you know, keep on going your merry way. It's like we're not taking plugins away from people.
Yeah, I'm still on Pro Tools 11, so I haven't kept my update plan going, to be honest with you, because everything's hunky-dory.
And honestly, you know, the thing is, Robbo, you don't need to, because right now, you updating doesn't really give you any advantage. You're still on Pro Tools 11. The version you've got with WAVES still works fine. Stay where you are. Now, when you upgrade your computer and update your versions to Pro Tools Ultimate, Awesome, Fantastic, or whatever it is going to be, then you're going to need to go to V12 WAVES, at which point you might need the WAVES update plan.
True.
And the WAVES update plan, if you have a a gap in it, do you have to backfill the gap, or do you guys just sort of like kindly let you pick up, like, hey, I didn't need you guys for 3 years and now I want to update? Is there like a...
We really couldn't care less. It's like, I mean, there was a point up until I think it was about 10 years ago, we stopped doing that. There was a point where, you know, the WAVES update plan would increase the longer you left it out of date.
Right.
Now we really couldn't give a toss. As far as I'm concerned, there's an Australian term for you. The official line from WAVES, we really couldn't give a toss if your WAVES update plan is out of date for a couple of years and then you come back. We're not going to punish you, basically.
Nice.
Beautiful.
Like, honestly, even for me, it comes down to things like Isotope, where, you know, like Isotope's been ruling the roost with noise reduction recently. And in Mercury, you've got Z noise. And I can't tell you how many times I'll say to my studio partners, like, we should get Isotope or something. And then a job comes in and it's a noise reduction thing, and I'll do it with X noise or Z noise. And
what about WNS? Have you tried WNS? Because WNS and NS1 are my two favorite ones.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't like the single-ended stuff as much, and I like grabbing the noise print and kind of. But I'll use WNS if I'm in session with people and they're just like, you know, you just need to do something fast. It's handy there, but I seem to be able to get better, more fine-tuned results with something like X noise or Z noise.
I mean, you've got to remember though as well how vintage those two plugins are and how powerful they still are.
Oh, absolutely. I never have like a client who's like, oh my gosh, like you couldn't do that. Like, why don't you have Isotope? It's like, so my studio partner's like, see, you did it again. We don't need to get Isotope.
I mean,
like,
the simple, I mean, I'm a huge believer in the best edit is the one that you never heard. So if somebody can hear a plugin being used, then it's a terrible plugin. So either that or somebody's not applying it properly.
Well, with noise reduction, it's usually the mistake is trying to squeeze too much noise out of it.
Yeah, you can bit crunch yourself. I mean, that's also one of the reasons why I like noise. I mean, especially when I'm dealing with a live noise, that's why I like NS1 and WNS, which is a noise suppressor, which is kind of like more like a cedar box. Because I can take specific frequencies and go, okay, right, I want those ones, and I want you to learn the consistency of that annoying noise and get rid of it.
The latency is low enough so you can run it on the input chain? Absolutely.
I did WNS. It's like I did an outside broadcast.
It's like a cedar.
It was the intro to, wasn't the Grammys. It was it was one of the many ones that Ryan Seacrest hosts everything these days. But either way, one of the biggest problems, I was mixing the hosts, and there were two plugins that I had on the mix. One of them was Dan Dugan Auto Mixer, so that I could have multiple microphones open at the same time and nobody was getting feedback. And the other one was WNS, because behind Ryan's microphone, we had the sound of LA, and the sound of LA is a really shit rumbly sound, and you've got to get rid of it. But it's virtually zero latency, and I literally put it on the mic and said, Ryan, stop talking for a second. He stopped talking. I grabbed the noise. I pressed learn. Rumble gone. Ryan sounds fine.
We were talking about the C4, and before WNS came out, I would use a C4 as an expander for noise reduction. For that,
it's a great use for that. I mean,
it's almost a similar thing. It's a multi-band expander. You know, it has the ability to learn the curve and see where it's at. But it's interesting. I find that I can get more noise transparently tweaking around with Z noise, but if you want like super fast and probably like 80% results, WNS just kind of gets you there. Just sort of pull the faders on each one until you
And NS1's
like a one fader version of that, right?
NS1 is noise reducer. WNS is definitely a noise suppressor. It's like, but NS1 has that one fader where it will literally look for the consistent noise and it'll just take it out, and it's virtually, again,
I got to be that guy.
Latency.
I got to have you explain WNS. I'm sorry, what a noise reducer versus
a noise suppressor. So the reduction is you're literally kind of like pulling things out of your mix. So and therefore it's usually not going to be as low latency, except NS1 is Voodoo Magic. and it's one fader. It looks for the consistent noise in whichever signal you're putting through it, and it'll take it out.
So is NS1 more like Z noise but more automatic, or is it like an expander?
In a way, yes. Because I mean, one of the things you're going to remember is it's like the three plugins that you've mentioned most in the last hour are three plugins that are literally between 15 and 20 years old: Z Noise, X Noise, and the C4. So WNS is, I think now, I think that's about 5 years old. NS1 is about 4 years old, but this is all technology that we've gained over the years where we've just got better at doing things. And better a lot of the time doesn't mean that the quality is better. It means that we're faster at it. So whereas Z Noise has like 1 million milliseconds of latency, but it's actually it's a really powerful plugin. NS1, you throw the fader up and it's done. WNS is pretty much the same. And WNS is looking at the frequencies and then kind of re-queuing and suppressing those frequencies, while it's more of a linear thing than a reduction thing. So
WNS, the way I think of it at least, is a multi-band expander for the, like, in crude terms. I know it's fancier than that. Whereas Z Noise is, to me, it's getting an FFT sort of transform of the noise, and then it's actively trying to take that out at a certain threshold. It's looking for that very, very precise pattern, not in broadband kind of chunks like WNS does. And I'm trying to figure out where the one fader deal fits in there that I never use. Is that one more like WNS? Is that one more like an expander, or more like take the FFT fingerprint of the noise and try to like...
It's going to take the fingerprint of the consistent... NS1 is going to take the fingerprint of the consistent noise and reduce it. One of the things that you can do with that, the same as you can do with X Noise and Z Noise, is you can go too far and suddenly feel like you're bit crunching your audio.
Like you're underwater with a sock in your mouth.
Right. Whereas with WNS, if you go too far, it'll sound like you're EQing yourself out, but it's not going to bit crunch you.
I agree. So, WNS is way more smooth, but the other one, if you tweak on it and sit with it, you can get another 15, 25% more noise reduction out of it and kind of get closer to that line.
And the difference is that WNS is a dynamic frequency range selection for broad or per band noise suppression, whereas the other ones, X, Z, and S1, are taking consistency in different frequencies and pulling them out. So there's a difference in how they work. They can all kick the ball into the goal. They're just going to do it in a different way. They're going to do it and smoother depending on and it's like, you know, you've really got to choose the one that's best for what you actually want to do at the time.
So what I found sometimes, especially like doing a multi-band expander, knocking out some obvious stuff that was easy, and then hitting the result with Z Noise, I was able to sometimes to get like smoother results.
Have you ever tried the F6 or the C6, for example?
I love the C6. It's a little bit too heavy, but I love using the sidechain. The fact that you can sidechain a multi-band compressor is sweet. And you can, I've created like automatic mixers where you just have the voice, and instead of knocking down the music, which most people will do, I'll use the C6 and just take out like a 4K little scoop out of the music when the voiceover comes in, and it just sits into the music, but it doesn't sound like we just dumped the music volume so much.
Right. So one of the things that we added to the C4 with the C6 was the floating band, and it was the floating band that made the C6 really, really popular with the broadcast world and the live world specifically. And that was what led us to make the F6, which is literally 6 floating bands.
So that's like really like a dynamic EQ at that point. Then
it is. It's a dynamic EQ with 6 floating, fully adjustable parametric filter bands.
Sure.
And it's amazing the amount of tweaking you can do with a plugin like that. I mean, I still use the C4 a lot.
With the C4, if you move one band, it adjusts the band next to it, so you always have like a zero sum. But with the F6, you could pile all 6 bands into one place and try to expand one and compress the other, and then hear the frustration.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, one of the beautiful things about the F6 for me is it gives me the ability to, especially when you add in all those floating bands with, say, for example, the sidechain, and it doesn't matter whether I'm doing a music mix for an artist or whether I'm doing something in post-production, even down to, say, for example, a voiceover, a music bed, and a master fader. It gives you the ability to really carve a space for the vocal in the music, so that rather than just pulling the music bed up or down or pushing the vocal higher, you just find the frequency the vocal is using and create a little pocket for it in the music bed and just sidechain it, and your mix is done.
I do that with like industrials a lot. I'll do that when I have a mix, especially sometimes where you don't have time to necessarily do a really thoughtful mix, but when the voiceover comes in, you want to drop the music level of the music. But I've found that like just dropping the music level wholesale is not as good as maybe carving out a little spot in the voice frequency and then combining that possibly with dropping the music level a tiny bit too. And then it's not as harsh of a drop, and you get a tighter mix.
I know it's not a Waves plugin, but I've actually just bought one that does exactly that. It's called Track Spacer, and it's amazing.
I'm Googling it.
So you basically sidechain your vocals or whatever it is that you want to do what you're speaking of. And it basically looks at the frequency of that and just ducks everything. But it's also got a high pass and a low pass, so you can sort of zoom in on exactly what frequency range you want it to look at to cut.
Isn't it funny how they name it? It's like, well, why would they call it a low cut and a high cut? Why wouldn't they just call it a high pass and a low pass?
It's probably high. They probably do. I'm just paraphrasing.
No, I'm staring at the Google. I'm staring at the plugin right now.
It is. I've had it for about 6 weeks, and it's on everything I do now. I basically for my radio imaging, I sidechain obviously anything that's voice to it, and then I have a bus that the bass mix goes through, and so I put the track spacer on there, and it just carves out a notch, and you can tell it how hard or how little you want it to work, and it just carves out a notch for your voice to sit in, and it's perfect. It's brilliant.
Robbo, come back to the Waves side. You can do it. Come back to the Waves.
Well, if Waves come up with one,
we did. It's called the F6 or the C6 as well.
I used to use the F6. To be honest with you, I did, but when this little thing popped its head up, I just went, "Thank you very much."
This is actually probably a really good time to mention this. Is one of the things that comes up a lot when I'm dealing with like an Andrew Sheps or a Chris Lord-Alge or someone, and we're going to do a masterclass online or in person. I say, send me the session or press play on the session so I can have a listen to it. And they go, there's a bunch of plugins in here that aren't Waves. And I go, I really don't care, because the real world scenario is not all Waves or all UA or somebody else. The real world scenario is we make tools that people use. I'm never going to try and depict a world where somebody always uses Waves, because that's bull.
But he's not going to send you a present for Christmas now.
That's all right. I'll still buy him a beer next time he's home. It's all right.
It's not a real world scenario that somebody would usually use only our plugins. They're going to use what's good for the job. So I'm okay with that. I can sleep at night.
I'm your poster child. I think I use pretty much. I use Avid plugins. I mean, there's a few, but like all the heavy lifting, it's like I find it so complete that like don't have to get other stuff. And
I appreciate that. I mean, we make a lot of plugins. But you just pointed it out. It's like Avid has their own plugins, Cubase has their own plugins, Logic has their own plugins. Reaper has a bunch of plugins, and there's so many other companies out there who make plugins, and we help a lot of those plugin companies now in coding, because they move their plugins onto the SoundGrid platform for live sound, because it helps them get into the live world. So we actually help a lot of these plugin companies like Plugin Alliance code their plugins so that they can, be out there more. So I'm all for it.
Here's a bizarre question, but SoundGrid is used a lot in live sound, but is it also used in like broadcast, I think you mentioned.
Absolutely. People, companies like ESPN and other broadcast companies use SoundGrid a lot. Anything's like DTS surround or any house of worship, for example. The house of worship use WAVES SoundGrid a lot. Little things like being able to use an Ethernet cable to it's like Dante, but is it layer 2 or is it layer 3? We're layer 2. Dante is layer 3.
Layer 3. Okay, so it's a little bit lower latency than Dante, then, isn't it?
It's less than a millisecond of latency. One of the things that we can do is we can go, okay, right, so you've got a live console or you've got a broadcast console. You can share that I/O, whether it's MADI or SoundGrid or through a Dante bridge into SoundGrid. You can split that I/O and you can share it between one console and then send it out to your Pro Tools rig in the studio or in the truck. Or
what is it, 64 channel or 32 channel?
128 mono or 64 stereo. You can have up to 8 plugins on every single channel. You can send 128 channels of audio from one place to another with plugin processing in less than a millisecond, or send it to 3 places in less than a millisecond.
So who are the DigiGrid or the developers or plugin developers who sit within the mixing environment, right? And then are there also developers that sit outside making hardware,
absolutely.
interfaces?
So Here Technologies, who make on-stage monitoring and in-ear monitoring, they make a Dante bridge to SoundGrid, which is 64 channels of SoundGrid to Dante or Dante to SoundGrid, in less than a millisecond. Apogee makes SoundGrid Symphony. Every single digital console manufacturer now has a SoundGrid card option that they make, from Yamaha to Lavo, etc. Burl Audio makes SoundGrid IOs. I mean, the SoundGrid is an industry standard. So, I'm not sure about Australia because it's been so long since I've been home, but House of Worship over here is a really, really huge, high money business. With large consoles and large budgets and a high quality demand of sound. And SoundGrid is literally one of the must-haves. So
I'm going to take you back just quickly because I haven't spoken to you since this happened, and I haven't upgraded to check it out, to be honest with you. But the Renaissance stuff had a new facelift a couple of years, a year or so back. Was there any changes under the hood, or is that just merely a cosmetic thing?
No, there's no reason that we would want to change anything.
Yeah, no, that was my question.
You never mess with
That's what I was asking.
You never mess with a good thing.
Yeah.
We changed. We did a 25th anniversary GUI update on the Renaissance plugins in the Q series and the L series. We gave people the option to use the originals or the new GUI because it's amazing how many. It's nearly like Porsche 911 owners or sports car owners. It's like you change something and they lose their shit.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many people who are going, no, I don't want to look at the new GUI. It's like, then you don't have to.
I do like an air-cooled GUI.
Doesn't everybody? But I mean, the one of my favorite new GUIs has to be the newer GUI for the Q series because it makes them easier to deal with when I'm dealing with a really, really complicated EQ and adjusting the real Q in the Q series. The new GUI is a lot easier to look at than the old one, I find.
And you're not talking about Q clone. You're talking about something else now.
No,
right?
I'm talking about the Q1, Q2, the Q6.
Oh, the original.
Q8.
Man,
the original,
going all the way back to like 1995.
No. Further than that. The Q10 was the first plugin we released. It was 1992.
Yeah, I remember using it in Sound Designer too.
But it's still the most used parametric EQ today. It's still the industry standard, and it's the one that I always go to. It's funny you talk about Q-Clone because I did a masterclass with Tony Maserati about 6 months ago, and it was one of the plugins that he said, I really want to talk about this because nobody does. Let's talk about Q-Clone.
I was going to say that's probably one of the most under thought of plugins. Yeah. Like
I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that that plugin is from an era where computers couldn't deal with quite as much processing as they can now. So, it comes from, and also there was a lot more hardware involved back in those days where you might have, I was working on a record with Scott Stapp from Creed about 10 years ago, and I used a ton of Q-Clone because he only had 3. I know it sounds funny. He only had 3 real Fairchilds. How dare he? And I wanted to use it on 15 different tracks, so I used Q-Clone.
Q-Clone can do convolution with dynamics? I thought it was only for EQ.
Pultex. Sorry.
Okay. All right.
Pultex.
Thank you. I was like, whoa.
No, sorry. Pultex.
Although a dynamic Q-Clone would be pretty badass.
Yeah, it would, but there'd be like 3 people in the world who would use it, and you and me would be 2 of them.
Not very profitable.
In this day and age, when you've got plugins like Shep's Omnichannel and CLA Mix Hub and the Abbey Road mastering chain, which is modeled on the TG mastering console in London, that can do so much and have the ability to move your compressor and your EQ and your pre and your out and move it around in the chain and add plugins in the chain. The need for a plugin like Q-Clone doesn't really have the same kind of demand anymore.
I don't know. I think, George, you could just basically go load a bunch of plugins up on some user's thing, get the whole perfect preset, Q-Clone it, and that's the only plugin they need. And they could have like the whole stack of whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, I'm scheming.
True.
It's like
absolutely. Can't you hear the noise? That grinding gears ticking over.
Tick.
So,
yeah, I mean, because what makes my job to make these plugins for people, program them, is so hard and kind of limits my tool set is because I have to support what they have.
Yeah.
I can't at this point really expect them to go out and buy a big plug-in bundle. It's really expensive, especially if they're using Audacity.
But with Q-Clone, you could.
That's right.
Right.
You could.
Right.
At least with the EQs.
Right.
And they only have to buy Q-Clone.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's
kind of cool.
It wouldn't be far-fetched to eventually say, in order to get a George the Tech chain, you need to first buy something. I'm not saying I wouldn't do that,
Well, I mean, that's kind of what I was getting at earlier on when I said, the gold bundle is like $10 a month. I mean, this is not something that's not in the realm of possibility, and it's certainly not out of everybody's reach. But
then you could be like, hey, I have a Fairchild, or not a Fairchild, sorry, a Pultec, and I have a Sontet EQ, and
right. Yeah. For those
Don
who
LaFontaine's actual compressor.
Right. I mean, that could get really interesting. Yeah. No, it's man, I've been doing this a long time, and I've been trying to find ways to make it more elegant, more user-friendly, and certainly more efficient for me. And, I'm doing it on Twisted Wave, Audacity, Audition, just SoundForge, all these Pro Tools and et cetera, and Reaper, and I'm trying to make it, a streamlined process. And it would be pretty remarkable to use the same amazing tool set each time.
Gomez is your man.
Imagine if you had a George the Tech GUI and you just did all the work at the back end.
Okay.
All right, stop. Now you're just blowing up my ego. But yes, I'm imagining that.
But this is kind of like where we are in plugin technology these days, is the ability to kind of like save a chain and say, okay, so, call it George 1. And inside it has like a Q10, and it has a Renaissance compressor, and it might have, a bit of a C4 on one
WNS.
specific. It's like a C4 or even an S1 imager or something, and have it come up as one preset.
And then as you said in the Waves rack, like map a few key parameters to it and say, don't touch any of that. Here's the 4 knobs that you can touch. This one, if you want to make it brighter. This one, if you want to make it
most
darker.
of the knobs are grayed out, or they're sort of like have an opacity layer that make them sort of mysterious, but behind a misty fog. They can't really see what they are, but they know they're there, and they're doing some cool stuff, but they can't figure out quite what it is. Like that plastic thing over the engine in every new freaking car.
I have a feature request. For the Waves rack.
Go for it.
You know how every rack in the back of a church has a big gate over it with a padlock, and you can't get to the EQ, and it's all set, and it's like, don't touch
And
it.
somebody sticks a chopstick in there and still messes with the
Still
freaking
tries to
knobs.
mess with it. So Waves Rack needs the gate with the padlock.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well,
Password.
we call that we call that Wave Central and a license.
There you go.
Yeah.
No. I'm not saying so you can't steal it. I'm saying so you can't touch the knobs.
Can't
Like
think with the knobs.
It's actually so we actually have our own live console called LV1, and one of the things that we designed LV1 on was for churches. It's a 64-channel virtual touchscreen console. And one of the main feature requests for broadcast and for House of Worship live sound was we want the ability to password lock it so all they can do is touch the faders. So we put that ability in. It's hard to do that in a studio though because it's it's not all us.
That's
so
right.
Yeah. That reminds me. Can I go on another tangent? And I'll keep it short. I worked in a giant mega church in Delaware in my early days out of college, trying to find gigs in audio. They had a recording studio where I was working and setting up the studio, and then there was a live side. And I walked into the live front of house thing, and the guy running the thing had a 3-ring binder. And I was like, "What's that?" And he's like, well, every song I have to do what's in the binder." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He's like, and I looked at the EQ, and it had a disco smile on the graphic, right? And I said, "Oh, how'd you come up with that EQ?" "Well, that's the pastor's setting."
Huh?
Oh,
Smile.
Okay. Now I understand how things run around here.
Yeah.
I was gone in about 6 months. I didn't stick around, but I was like, okay, that's the way things run here. I'm out of here.
So if you go to waves.com/studio rack, STUDIORACK, if you've got Waves plugin, you can download this, add it to your Wave Central, and any plugins you have will show up in it. And we actually now, as part of the approach to the pandemic, is I run and manage weekly webinars, one-on-one and small Zoom class webinars on how to use things like Studio Rack that are all part of the website so that people can actually ask live questions on how do I use this and how do I set this up and how do I... But I mean, as far as radio goes and post-production goes, Studio Rack is kind of like a gem that not enough people are talking about because it's free.
You guys used to have the rack, like way back in like Nubus. You could basically run your whole Nubus system as a bunch of like just a big DSP farm.
So that was the Waves Max rack. And what's interesting is that technology turned into our consumer division. So, our consumer division in Waves is actually bigger than the pro side. We're in pretty much half the world's laptops, TVs, smartphones, Fitbits, and everything else. So,
you guys gonna like mess with an election?
No, we try. I don't know about you. I mean, this is for the. I am an American citizen now, so I can say the fellow Americans. I am sick to death of hearing about the election at this point in time in my life.
So listen, while we're on requests and you're talking about Wave Central, can I make one quick one, or can I maybe get your feedback on one as to why it goes this way? I probably, like most people these days, obviously I have my home studio. And then a couple of weeks ago, it was school holidays. I grabbed the laptop and deauthorized my computer here and authorized everything on my laptop, blah, blah, blah. But it occurred to me when I was setting up the laptop where we were staying for the week that had I forgotten to deauthorize my computer here, I would have been screwed. But,
well, actually, no, you wouldn't have been.
Oh, okay. So this was my question.
Now in the Waves update plan, if you and this is and Robbo, this is actually one of the things that you would get as a benefit out of the Waves update plan is with the Waves update plan now gives you two versions.
Yeah.
2 versions of every license you have. So for those people who do have, like, say, for example, I'm sitting in a recording studio here in Miami, Florida, and I have a Mac and a PC, and they're both running on 2 completely different systems. One's on an HDX system and one's not. So I don't want to have to kind of like move my waves around. So I have 2 completely different licenses that are part of the same Waves update plan.
Right, okay.
Because, yes, I work for Waves, but I pay for my own tools when I'm working outside of Waves. So, part of the Waves update plan is you get two versions of the license.
Okay, there you
That
go.
was interesting because I actually bought some stuff just recently, and part of that sale was you get the 2 licenses. So I did the same thing. So I've got that whatever the plugin. I can't even think what I bought now. I did have an issue, I must admit, but the service was fine from Waves, and they actually set up my PC for me.
I have to be honest. I'm going to wave our own flag on this. Our tech support are top notch. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is, I mean, yes, we're a big company, but we're not that big. But we have 22 hours a day round the clock tech support. And that's pretty much worldwide. So it's not bad. And
it's very good.
That's great.
How do you see the future of plugins? Where do you see it all going?
Studio Rack is a fairly good sign as far as I'm concerned about where things are going. Is like I don't think that the plugin is going away. I think what's going to happen is it's going to get more intuitive. I think everything is going to be more look ahead. Like, I mean, we've already got look ahead plugins. Like the L2 was a look ahead. It was one of the first look ahead limiters. I think plugins are going to start making a few more decisions and giving you the opportunity to use those decisions on how the plugins and the DAWs of the world see the frequencies that you're punching into them and how it gets mixed out. What I don't think is going to happen is I don't think that the technology is going to replace talent. I think talent is still going to be something that's very, very much in demand.
Oh, damn it,
I know
I'm
people
screwed.
are saying, oh my God, right. Well, so am I. But I mean, it's like every time we do masterclasses, there's nearly always the conversation of, one day these plugins are going to take away our job. I don't think they will. I think these plugins and the technology are making lives easier. Especially as budgets grow smaller, they make things faster to do, so you don't have to spend quite as much time on a job that isn't making you as much money as it was 5 years ago. I think that technology is just going to get better.
It's funny. I know we're going to wrap this up, but just quickly, just an observation that I do another podcast purely on imaging with a couple of guys out of the UK, and it's funny that in some areas of particularly my industry, stuff like your One Knob series, for example, is sort of poo-pooed. But it's interesting to me that in the right hands and when used in the right place and at the right time, A, it can save you a shitload of time, but B, it can also be just as effective as spending 3 hours getting the same sound.
Well, this is one of the things that comes up a lot when it comes to the signature series, like the Jack Joseph Puig series or the Tony Maserati or the Eddie Kramer ones. Eddie Kramer is one of my best friends, and people are like, I wouldn't use that plugin because it's for amateurs. No, Eddie uses those plugins on his gear. Tony Maserati uses his own plugins. Andrew Sheps uses his own plugins. Greg Wells, who mixed Adele, uses his own plugins. It's like these plugins, if they are used the right way, save you time and give you a really good sound. They are not, it's like there should never be this perception that a plugin is a cheat because it's easy. If it gives you a decent sound, then go for it. It's like, it was a masterclass I gave probably about a year and a half ago where it was for post-production people in Thailand. And one of the questions came up was, I feel like sometimes my sessions don't look busy enough. And pardon my French, I was like, how the fuck do you think anybody is going to know that? At what point is somebody going to listen to your radio promo on the radio and go, holy shit, his Pro Tools session probably looked really bare. But at the same point, it's like nobody's going to listen to something and go, oh, I bet the plugin he used for that was only one knob.
This white bread doesn't have enough ingredients.
That's right.
I wish it had ingredients that was like 75 ingredients.
Right. The bottom line on this one, Robbo, is I think people think, you're right, I think people think way too much on it. As far as I'm concerned, if a One Knob plugin called One Knob Brighter makes something brighter and that's what you needed, and it takes away 2 hours of other digging yourself into a hole, then you are way ahead of the pack.
I totally agree. And I can't tell you how many times when I've been in a mad screaming rush or just didn't have the inclination to sit and fart ass around, that Butch Vig Vocals has saved my ass. It's a great plugin.
Butch, And he's just such a lovely guy too. And the thing, it's interesting, it's completely irrelevant, but the whole look and feel of the artist signature plugins is based on a huge questionnaire that we do with the artists about the things that they love. And one of Butch Vig's favorite things is steampunk. So Butch Vig Vocals is nothing but steampunk. It's cogs and wheels, and they all move when you touch something. And the amount of people who are like, holy shit, it sounds great, but oh my God, that cog moves when I move it. So the look of things actually inspire people to get a better sound sometimes. It's a weird one.
Well, I have to say, when Andrew and I were discussing the subjects we would be talking about today, and we got onto, Gomez is coming on to talk about WAVES 12. Yeah, that should take about 15 or 20 minutes. We are now pushing 2 hours on this one, so we should probably get the hell out of here.
And you still haven't asked me the question about the female vocal.
Well, that's coming up.
Okay.
Beautiful.
This show was mixed by Voodoo Radio Imaging. Edit by Andrew Peters. Using Rode microphones and Source Connect Now. Tech support from George the Tech Whittam. And supported by Harlan Hogan's VoiceOverEssentials.com. The home of the Portabooth Pro.